This is That One Audition with Alyshia Ochse.
I just wrapped up an interview with Sullivan Jones.
No.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
And last night I was like researching between the two of you guys, but I for some reason missed the bio of the slave play. Then I had 45 minutes between the two interviews, and I'm like, I'll be motherfucking damned. Back to back? You can't, like, you guys aren't with the same people. So like the scheduling of that, I know so much already.
And also, we've never met.
What?
Yes, Sullivan and I have never met because Sullivan was in the original cast, and I came in that when Broadway came back, Slave Play was remounted.
Yes.
And I like to call it the reboot.
Reboot.
It was rebooted, remounted on Broadway, and I was in that cast that then transferred to Los Angeles.
What are the chances?
I know, but I've heard so much about him. You know what? Truly, I may have met him like in passing somewhere, but we've never had a hang time, so I don't consider that having really met.
As your connector, the great connector, not that the play was, as me as the great connector, I would absolutely love for you guys to meet because you're gonna love each other. It was so great. He's great.
He's very talented.
So talented. You both are. I'm so excited. Okay. Devin, like, how do you go up from ski racing to all of a sudden getting a scholarship for acting?
You know, I don't know. My dad started everything late in life. He was like really a student of everything. And he took on skiing I think he started skiing when he was like late 30s, which I think for skiers is like
it's a late
start.
Okay.
And he got obsessed with it so much that he became a ski race coach and then wanted me to be a ski racer.
Of course.
So he was my coach from like when I was 6 years old to when I was probably 12, 13. And that's when I aged up into some like higher levels and he stayed down at some of the younger ages. But that's how I got into it. My dad was my ski coach. And when your dad is your ski coach, like you don't have a choice.
No, you don't. And you end up being one of the best, right? Because where does practice and like family life really start and stop? So I'm sure, especially with his obsession, which I always say, I was an athlete too. And whenever I interview athletes, it doesn't make sense as a linear trajectory or plane to go from like, oh, I'm an athlete, now I'm an actor. The work ethic is the same. And I think a lot of creative people don't usually have that ingrained in them. So I think taking that type of like schedule or seeing how much you can progress, right? I'm going to practice this and practice this. And then tomorrow I'm just going to do it on the slopes. And I didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
Same thing for acting, right? I'm going to practice. And then I'm in the scene and I just did something. And I didn't even know that I just did that in my audition.
You know what I call that? I call that unconscious competence.
Oh, you know what I call it?
What?
Unconsciously skilled. Like it's the same thing, right? There's this great thing with this teaching device where it's like you're unconsciously unskilled at a certain point, right? And then you become consciously unskilled, meaning you now know that you don't know shit and don't know how to do it. And then you become consciously skilled where you're like, okay, I know I have to hit my mark here and I'm going to do this thing, but it feels clunky, right? As you know how to do it now. Now it's like that unconscious place where it's like it just happens. Ugh.
You can do it in a flow state and it just is good technique right in a flow state.
So talk to me about good technique going to school because you got a scholarship for acting. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, I did. I was very lucky.
How does one get that these days?
Okay, so I had graduated from undergrad from NYU and I was out. I think my first job was at the Jiva Theater doing a course line. I understudied 5 different roles and went on for, I think, 4 of the 5, and then went to Atlantic City to do Anything Goes. So I had graduated doing musical theater, but I knew from being in those shows that I didn't want to do musical theater.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't love the environment and didn't love the way I felt. And so I always had this hunger to do film and television and straight plays and stuff like that. And I met this woman named Lisa Rothy who had gone to NYU grad acting. And she, I guess, got an email from NYU grad being like, hey, we're looking for people to come to school. Do you have any recommendations? And she sent my name in. And I think her recommendation it just said, accept him, you won't regret it.
I love those. I love those light bearers,
Right?
setting some light on your path, really.
Yeah. And I went into the audition, and this is where I went into the audition, and I remember we had to do 4 monologues and a song. And the Zelda Fichandler was the head of the program and queen of NYU grad acting, and had a long history. Got an award from the Clintons for like basically being the artistic director of Arena Stage, and was a really big advocate for regional theater all around the country. And she was sitting there in her Chanel, because she always wore Chanel, and was so silent. And I did my first monologue, and she was like, Shakespeare. And then I did Shakespeare, and then she was like, more Shakespeare. Like, it was that simple. And then she's
Ah,
like, last monologue, song. And I did it. And then I left. And I think, yes, I left. And then the next day at 10:30 a.m., I got a call. Could I come in for a call back at 11:30?
oh,
I was like, sure. And I ran over there and I did an improv with my now good friend Isaiah Johnson, tremendous actor. And then I left that callback, and 30 minutes later, I had an offer with a full ride to go to NYU grad acting.
that's like winning a lottery ticket, right? Even that
Yes.
story, you're like, okay, that is just, I love these stories
And
because you want it to be that simple. You want it to be that
yeah,
simple. And it's usually
yeah.
not.
And I also didn't necessarily make the choice to go to grad school. Like, it just happened. Like, everyone who goes to grad school, they're like, okay, I'm going to apply. I'm going to work on all my monologues. I'm going to go audition Juilliard, Yale, NYU, and whatever other program that they want to audition for. And you do the rounds, and you get to know all the people auditioning. And I didn't get any of that. So it was like such a weird,
Meant to be.
magical, meant to be thing. Yeah.
Okay, so then tell me how it goes once you graduate from grad school. Do you go straight into doing the slave play?
No, no,
Okay.
no.
Okay, I wanted to make sure.
Bad. It went bad.
It went bad?
Yeah.
That's the thing is sometimes when people I've been talking to like thousands of actors, and
Yeah.
even my business partner went to conservatory and then got her MFA and did all this, and she was winning theater awards and then couldn't book a co-star, right? So like you just depending on what you want to do, right? If you want to transition straight into stage, yeah, you're supported sometimes from getting your grad degree. But if you want to go into television and film, sometimes they're not preparing you for the process to get the job. Once you get the job, you know what to do, essentially. So,
Yeah, though I would even say I had no idea what I was doing. I left with my master's, and it was like if I did a good job, it was because magic happened, not because I had
mm,
any understanding of what the job was or any practicality around it. And I went when you asked me to be on the podcast, I went back and listened to some of the interviews, and one of them was Michael Aguirre, of course.
yes,
We'll get to in a second.
I know.
And Michael, when I was listening to him, I was like, man, he always knew what he was doing.
Mhm, mhm.
And I
Yeah,
and
he
I just
specifically knew. Uh, He did. And to see his success right now, I could cry.
I
To
know.
to watch Shrinking, I screamed the first time I saw it because the show met him exact like very rarely do you get that opportunity, right? To have the show meet you with your confidence, what your authenticity is, all of it. And he did. He always knew. And because of that North Star, I don't think anybody can knock you off the pedestal. Now, the rest of us tend to try to find, we go to school to find our confidence, right?
Yeah.
We go to a conservatory and find our confidence. It'll take us 20 years. It'll take somebody shedding a light or giving us an opportunity to be like, I mean, maybe I am pretty good at this. And then there's just those rare breeds that there is, and also the support system that he had, where there's no defying or denying what he encounters and who he
And
is.
yeah, and the people who believed in him around him, like
Exactly.
walking into rooms and being the person that they wanted to solve the problem.
Yes. And he knew
I,
that.
yeah. So when I get out of grad school, I work a little bit. I book a play at the Shakespeare Theater in New Jersey. I book a play at Classic Stage Company. I have a recurring role on The Path. Yes, like these things happen, but they're few and far between. And I'm also not one of those actors who gets a lot of auditions. Like I get like one every 2 weeks, maybe. You know,
Okay.
that's been my
I'm, s-
story.
I'm so glad that you're doing the podcast right now. I'm so incredibly glad. For somebody that doesn't get as many auditions, because right now, even the climate, the way it is, we're not getting as many opportunities. There's a constriction in the business. What were you doing up to Chicago Med? I would say
Yeah.
up to what were you doing to not only juggle and pay for your lifestyle, but then to keep your creative, like we said, that confidence sustaining till the job comes in, essentially, that is helps.
Yeah, first of all, I don't know that I kept my confidence up. I will say that. I think that was like a big struggle up until moving to LA, actually. But when I was so basically, while that was all happening, I started teaching. And I taught kids up in the South Bronx in Hunts Point at the Hunts Point Alliance for Children, a wonderful non-for-profit. And I ran their Shakespeare program, which was with fourth, fifth, and sixth graders. And I ran a writing program with seventh and eighth graders. And basically, the program is to create educational stability in an environment that is unstable.
Mhm.
Um, and so we offer a home after school for people to come and learn from all the lessons you learn from Shakespeare, but not just Shakespeare itself, but also from showing up every single day and having a team and a community around you and all those lessons. And also in the writing portion, expressing
Mhm.
yourself and feeling comfortable with who you are. And I I also was teaching scene study at Malloy College and doing other stuff, but that was my main teaching job. And I think 6 years into doing that, I like could have been like an education director at a theater. Like I like literally was like, "So maybe I'll just change directions here." And I
Mhm.
booked this off-Broadway play at the Playwrights Realm, and my agent called and said, "Hey, you got an offer. We're so excited. Can we accept?" And I was like, "Let me take the weekend, think about my kid's schedule." And he said to me, he said, "Devin, are we teaching or are we acting? What are we doing?" And I like honestly didn't know how to make that choice. And so the only thing I could do was basically I decided that a therapist had told me like maybe a year or two before that, why don't you just try being an actor? I'm like, well, I don't like not having money. He said,
Yeah, there's that.
right. And he was like, what if you don't have money for 2 years? Like just try 2 years of not having money. So I heard that in my voice in my head. And then I was like, I'm gonna move to Los Angeles because it's the only way that I can get away from these kids.
From
Not
the
because
school.
yeah, because if I lived in New York, I would have to go up every single day.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I moved to LA and I got my first audition the first week I was here. I only had a manager at that time. I had been dropped by my agent when actually a month after my dad had died. Like things had really gone downhill.
Oh
And
God.
I, yeah, which is a whole nother story, but we're not there. And I get to LA and I get my first audition for Criminal Minds. And
Scott
I
David. Walking in with Scott David because I know Scott would love you.
Oh
Hmm.
no, I think this is actually post Scott David.
Oh, it
This
was
is like
Pose.
post Scott
Was
David.
it Lisa?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so I didn't know any casting directors at this time. And so I go into this audition. I have a pre-screen, and then I get to the director session, producer session. I think I had 3 sessions for it.
Mhm.
And I booked it. And I was like, it was my first audition. I was like, I am meant to be in Los Angeles. I am an actor. This is amazing. And I show up to set, and the way I rehearsed it was always sitting, talking to this person.
Mhm.
And then I get there and I'm standing and I'm talking to these two people. And the person I thought I was talking to has their back to me. And then all of a sudden, I don't know my lines.
Oh, yes.
And I have this
Mhm.
crazy experience where I'm like, I feel the air go out of the room. I'm like, I'm gonna get fired. Luckily, it all came back in. I have my master's. I could
You have
work,
tools. Hmm.
but I walked off set that day and I was like, Devin, if you want to do this for a living, like this is a hard job. And if this is what you showing up to this set is the thing that you want to do, you've got to actually enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so I went on this process, not unlike sports, where I was like, I wasn't looking at the preparation. I wasn't looking at it in a way that was like as rigorous as I should have been. It was
Hmm.
all based on other things that I now know were not helping me.
Okay, so then okay, tell me what preparation you stepped into.
So what I realized, there was two things. One, there was my self-confidence. I didn't believe that what I knew was enough, and
Mm.
I didn't believe that I was enough. And so I had to go on this journey. And so basically what happened was, because I had this teaching situation, I started like coaching actors and auditions and being like, that was how I was going to try to like help make money in
Mhm.
LA. And through that process, teaching other people what I knew to be right, I actually taught myself.
Isn't it amazing when you go back to the basics or when you're teaching somebody else, things that you maybe rush through or you don't think about, when you slow down, all of a sudden come back to the surface, you're so educated in doing certain things, especially if you were teaching children. You can't be
Yes.
more educated in patience, distilling things down to simplicity. And I think that's a big part of what we do as actors is just getting back to the simplicity of it. Like we said earlier, the consciously skilled place where you're like, there's a turn here and I'm going to do the rules of three here. It
Right.
feels so clunky. It's just getting back to the simplicity of it and the practicing of it. And I love how it met you. So then what's the next audition that comes through when you're at this level of understanding? I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. So then I start to realize that what I realized in that moment was that I was memorizing anxiety as opposed to memorizing, not even memorize, as opposed to actually script analysis, as opposed to understanding my given circumstances, my relationship where I am.
Yeah.
Like and it's proven science that what you memorize is how you'll memorize it,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes, but I've never heard it this way. This is so beautiful to hear. I was memorizing anxiety because I think so
Yeah.
many actors do that. You get the audition and then you're like, "Huh, okay, I'm not going to know what to do." And then if I do get this job, like we go into such future tripping versus
Yes.
just sitting down with the script.
Yes. So then I started to connect all of those dots. And then I also realized that I had this insane idea that every time I got an audition, I'm half Japanese, I'm gay, I'm all those things. But every time I got an audition, I was like, this is a white person and they are straight.
Mm,
I had this realization that, and this is, of course, film and television, you're always acting from who you are. And
mm,
even if they don't know, casting doesn't know, the producers don't know who you are, they can tell when you're being authentic to yourself and when you're not,
mm,
right?
mhm.
When you're not pulling
Yes.
from your well.
Yes. Yeah.
So I started pulling from my well, and immediately things started to fall into place.
Progress. Yeah.
Yeah, leading up to Slave Play.
Okay.
I got the audition for Slave Play, and I hadn't seen it in New York, as I didn't see Sullivan. And I was reading the play for the first time, and the character was someone who was white passing, so part something like me, and was gay.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, I was like, wait, this is me.
I can do this. Mm.
Yes, I can do this. And also, I have this theater training. I
Yeah.
understand that. And now I have all the script analysis from film and television, right? Like I've got all of this stuff is coming together. And I think I had a week to prep it. And I just like dove in deep. And it was a self-tape, right?
Yeah.
And I was all by myself. There was no casting director giving me notes. There was no one telling me what this play was about. I'd never seen it. I didn't talk to anyone who saw it. I didn't want to know anything. And I just did what I thought, did what I would do.
Hmm. And look how that met you.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Wow.
The best part about this story is that casting didn't even want to see me. When
I
like
was
my manager had to push me for this, and they were like, no, no, no. And finally he was like, I'm telling you, he is your person. You need to see him. And so I sent my tape in. I got a call. They said, hey, will you fly to New York? This is pre-Omicron. We're like
Mhm.
mid-Delta,
Yep.
right?
Okay. Yeah, exactly.
So it's like
Like,
it's a little
yeah.
risky. Like vaccine had just come out. It's a little, what are we doing?
Mhm.
And I fly to New York, and I hadn't been on my feet in front of people in a year and a half. And I rent for 2 days, I rented rooms at the studio, like rehearsal rooms. And I got up on my feet and I invited friends and I said, I'm just going to do this thing for you because I haven't been in front of people. I don't know what this is going to be like. And I just worked on it as much as I could. And then I walked into that audition room, and it was like magic. It was like that test that you dream of.
It's also like exactly being an athlete. Again, what we were talking about. You're like, I'm going to practice, I'm going to practice, I'm going to practice, I'm going to practice. You're completely prepared for game day.
Yeah.
You can't be more. So then any anxiety is gone. Just from the
Yes.
motion of doing it. I have to always meet my anxiety with preparation. It's the only way. Nothing else will soothe it other than preparation. So the anxiety
Yes.
can then leave the building. Okay, so slave play, obviously, and it comes to LA. You do it here in LA, right?
Yeah, and that was really important.
The TV and film landscape, it's constantly changing, but traditional actor training has largely remained the same.
It's focused on a theater model whose main goal is to help you stretch the expression of your instrument. That's why you can have years of training,
From singing study classes to audition classes.
to even an MFA, and still not be able to book a 2-line co-star.
That's why we created the Bridge for Actors.
A collection of tech, craft, and business online courses to teach you the skills that you need to go from a student of acting
To a working actor.
And that was really important because that's a journey. If there's any advice I could give any actor who does theater in New York, is that if your play is transferring to LA, do it. Go with it to LA, because the amount of people that I met, casting people that I met through doing slave play here in LA at the Center Theater Group was crazy.
Is that when who now just left me? Who was casting Shrinking? Who cast Shrinking?
Romano Benner.
And Brett, right?
Yeah.
Did they see the play?
Yes.
I was like, how? Not that we need to jump right to Shrinking, but I also want to jump right to Shrinking because
Yeah.
Chicago Med's great. That's a lottery ticket. I look
Yeah.
at primetime television just like a commercial. I'm not knocking anybody, but it is a formula and it is a look, right? So you achieve the formula. I'm not surprised you get a great recur on Chicago Med. Thank you. Jonathan Strauss, cast off tape.
Yeah, oh gosh, it's escaping me because she was doing just that one season. It's someone who took over, but Jonathan Strauss was the executive in charge of my approval.
I'm sure a great tape fits the bill.
Sarah Isaacson.
Sarah, yes. Okay, so Sarah Isaacson, I'm just curious for our listeners.
Yeah.
A role like this, was it guest star recur to begin with, or was it like this is a nice guest star
For Chicago Med?
Yes, for Chicago Med.
Chicago Med was two episodes. Like a
That
2 episode.
turned, and then it turned into you've done a lot, right? 19. When they like you, they like you. And I'm going to make the
Right.
assumption that they really liked you, so they just continue to write for you. I say all the time on the podcast, I say it when I'm teaching. Your job when you get a guest star recur, even a small one, make a relationship with anybody else or make eyes with anybody else on the series regular cast so they keep you around and be nice on set because they need material to write. That's it. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's exactly what happened for Chicago Med, right? I'm
Yeah.
assuming.
Yeah. It was just looking back on it, I had a great entry into it because Kai is a dick.
He's arrogant
He's
as fuck. It's
arrogant
so fun.
as fuck. And he made people mad. Like people did not like him. And honestly, best thing that could have happened to Kai. Because it's like the minute that you are drama, it's easy then to put you into things because then there's always this little bit of tension, right? There's a story that comes with your character. And and then on top of that, the best thing about those shows is how the Chicago shows is how what a family everyone is. So then when you start to show up and you get to know all the regulars, all the crew, it's they want to keep having you back because you're family. They want to see you.
Yeah, and they go on forever and always and ever. They're like they are a nighttime soap. So they need storylines to play into.
Yeah.
Well done. Well done.
Thank
Like that's a good bucket list check as an actor where you're like, okay, I got this. I got my procedural check. Check, check,
Mhm.
check. Now we got to talk about Shrinking because it's such an honor to watch it. As an audience member, we have needed something like this for a long time. I want to know what was on the page. So we know that the casting directors had seen you from the
Mhm.
slave play. From slave play to Shrinking, it's a few years though, right?
No.
It's pretty quick.
I closed Slave Play, and a month later I booked Shrinking. And then I
know why?
booked
Because I'm
Chicago
thinking about some of
Med
them.
right
When?
after while I was shooting the last week of Shrinking.
What are the chances? Okay. Okay. I want to know you getting the material of Shrinking because look, a big part of the success of it, the writing's great, but you all are so fantastic. And you know, when you get something, especially this is a pilot, Brett and Jason wrote it basically, right?
And
I've worked with Bill before. I love it. He puts his name on things, but I always give credit. Like I did Life Sentence with him, the two showrunners, they write it. Bill puts his stamp on it. Thank you, Bill. I'm sure he also wrote a couple of episodes, but so Brett and Jason write this, I'm sure. What
Mhm.
was on the page? They're both funny dudes. Was it really funny? What was there?
Yeah, I actually originally auditioned for Michael's part. I went back when I was in doing Slave Play in New York, I made a tape. I actually rewatched it recently and I was like, it's pretty good actually. But yeah, I auditioned for that part. And when obviously it went to Michael and I just thought, oh, there's not going to be anything else for me in that thing. Who knows? And I thought the script was very funny and fun. And also because I was auditioning for Brian doesn't enter in until episode 2.
Yeah, what scenes did they have you even doing for Brian?
Yeah, so they had us do like the pickleball scene at the end.
Okay.
They
Yeah.
had us do the storming into the therapist office, like interrupting the therapist. And then the scene where he does the lawyering, where he's like, oh, and
Oh, good. Great scenes.
great
Lovely
scene,
scenes.
great
Lovely.
pack.
And then,
Yeah.
so this is still during somewhat COVID times. Did you make a tape or did you go in?
Yeah, so I've only ever booked off tape.
I like that.
Do you? I
Well,
don't know.
yes. I
I
like it, but do you I like putting myself on tape because I like knowing how I'm framing it, how I'm lighting it. I really like the whole creative process. I don't find it daunting. I actually find it exhilarating versus when you'd go in the room and you'd be like, that felt good. And then you leave and you're like, I don't even know where the camera was, like, or what they were doing. I just feel like sometimes I like it. I like being able to see the product, send it
Yeah.
off, or watch it and be like, that rang false. Let me just do it again. That's the part I like.
Yeah, you and I come from the same camp. It's fun. I enjoy the process of making a self-tape. I think the part of it that I find always a little disconcerting is that I don't actually have much of a conversation. I submit the tape, it's my pitch, and then with both Shrinking and Chicago Med, they just said, and now you have an offer. And I just show up. No one ever says, oh, come in, let's meet, let's talk. There's always just sort of like and here we go.
Wow. So for Shrinking, when you made the tape for Brian, they didn't have you tape again for Charlie. They just were like, hey, by the way.
No, so they did. So I made the tape for Brian, and then I think a month or so later, I forget, I got an audition for Charlie, and I immediately off the page, I knew who this guy was. I was like, I know this guy's life. I know exactly how I would be in the circumstance. And so the tape it's one of those things where you make it and then you watch it and you're like, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
perfect.
Which scenes did Charlie have? Because you have so many great moments in the show, but sometimes it's like interjecting with 6 other series regulars, right? Where it's a couple lines here, or a couple lines over there, or you might have one good scene with you and Brian together. But what did they have you do for the audition?
Yeah, they had us. I remember I think there were 2 scenes. The second scene, I think, was the proposal.
Okay.
The proposal, and yeah, when it was at the after, so not the proposal itself, but with the surprise proposal, if that makes sense, when Harrison
Yes.
Ford interrupts us. And then the first scene, oh yeah, the first scene was him calling Jimmy, or picking up the phone from Jimmy when Jimmy calls, the very first time when you meet Charlie.
Okay.
And I think Charlie was only supposed to be in 2, maybe 3 episodes at that point.
There's no way you can't not be in it, because we need, and obviously so much more that I'm not going to ask about where it's going. But for those that have watched up to season 2, like, you guys are going to have a baby,
Yeah.
you know?
Or we
So
want to have a baby.
you want to have a baby.
We
Let me,
want to have a baby.
and now you want to have a baby at the same time, which is so okay. Okay. So back to the audition process.
Yeah.
So
So
you make the tape for Charlie. Do you guys ever do a chemistry read? You and Michael, do they make you do anything?
no. Okay, so the one thing that did happen was I did get it was a retape where they wanted me to do one scene one more time, and they just wanted me to make a joke on this one line. And I find that stuff hard to
It's
like do
so
a
hard.
full precision joke in the middle of something that was so like is so threaded and lived in. And then you're like, okay, now I have to repeat that. And now, normally that would just happen in an edit.
Uh-huh. They grab it from take 2, and then the rest of take 6 is perfect. How did you approach that so you didn't get in your head?
Yeah, I don't know if I succeeded. I feel like I did and it landed, but I still go when I revisited that tape maybe like 3 months ago, and I still think my original tape was stronger. And I think that just happens, right? Like they see the thing they want, and then they see you crack the joke, and then they know that there's going to be an edit. The thing I did know was that I was friends with Michael before. We had played Mafia on Zoom during the pandemic together. We were invited to the same party. So I knew who I was acting with. I knew what that would be like. I could build the relationship in my head. And he had already been announced as playing the role.
Did you
So
reach out to him at all once you did this? So you didn't do any of that. What I
no.
love that I think actors need to hear too is once you know who's cast, you can make an educated decision, especially in a relationship, to build in the juxtaposition. You know exactly how Michael's going to be in this, or at least you could probably really hear his voice,
Yeah.
because it feels like your Charlie anchors him just a little bit, right? Brian can go way out there. So for you to anchor, it works. If you were also way out there, it wouldn't work as well. You know what I'm saying? So what a great research. That's part of our job, is to understand and research so you can throw it down. And then they call and you just get Charlie.
Yeah, and then I call and I just get Charlie. And what was amazing was I did not reach out to Michael at all, because I think, one, I just don't think people really have that much say. It's like above their pay grade, and to put that pressure on someone is uncomfortable and unfair, I think. And
Yep.
second, I didn't really necessarily, I wanted it to happen because it happened and not because I made a phone call.
Yes, I understand. Yeah.
But what I did find out later is that Bill did, I think once they had chosen me, he did go up to Michael and say, "Hey, I think this is the guy we're going to cast as your husband." And Michael went, "That guy."
Then that's exactly the organic way that you want it to go, right?
Yeah.
Where they're like, "Oh yeah, great." Okay. So I have to know, first day on the job, there's so many moving pieces, and I think you can use Chicago Med or Shrinking for this. I
Okay.
truly think sometimes the hardest jobs to get and the hardest jobs to execute. Co-star, right? Couple lines, your transitional character, you're just moving right through, hit your line, you get 2 takes because they want all the time for the series regulars. Another really amazing role to get, and then sometimes challenging and sometimes amazing, is that like great recur, 5th, 6th lead, integral part of the story, But most of the time when you're in a lot of the scenes, you're in with all the series regulars and you're pitching in a line here or there, except for when it's like you and Brian. That's great, right? Charlie and Brian, we love those scenes. Like you know how to do that day in and day out. I would love to hear your perspective on either show on how to handle, I think, our own confidence and ego when we're in the scene where we're trying to have our like a couple, you know what I'm trying to ask, right?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're asking. It is being recurring on a television show is one of the trickiest jobs I've found because it always feels like your first day, even though it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of space you can take up is dependent on a lot of factors. Like you said, when it's just me and Michael, it's very different, right? Because we're in a loving relationship in the show and we have a camaraderie as peers, as people who work together. And so that becomes a very lived-in relationship. But then, of course, when you're acting with people that you don't normally act with, like that becomes a whole nother ball game. I feel like I'll go with Shrinking because Chicago Med is much more, there's much less improv that happens on the Chicago Med.
It's formulaic. Yes,
Set.
it's
Yeah.
very.
And they're also very, everything's please say the words that the writer wrote.
We gotta get to commercial break now. Yes, exactly.
And I will say that because of my experience on Shrinking, I've now started to like, if there's something that I really think would add or would be additive, I will go up and ask the writer, be like, hey, I'm thinking that this might be a nice moment. And then that conversation happens and you can get permission in that environment to do that. But I would say that took a couple seasons, do you know what I'm saying, to really get that trust. But Shrinking is different because it's, it has a looser vibe. It's funny and you're trying to land jokes and there's a lot of improving at the ends of scenes. And the thing that always feels so great about being on that set is that Bill loves everyone's ideas.
Yeah, he's great at that. He's a good yes and man. He's so great at that.
And he's so encouraging. Like he's constantly, every time I'm there, because Charlie tends to not be as heavily written as the other characters, he knows that he wants to cut to me, right? To like get my opinion. So he knows that he needs to get me to improv a bit throughout a scene so that there is momentum to cut to. And that especially has started to happen on season 2. And I started to feel really confident and comfortable because the rest of the cast, I specifically think about Jessica Williams. She has a real way of just, if your improv is going bad, she's going to go down with you. Yes, and even if it's not going to be great. And they're all like that. And even if there's a real stinker in there, no one takes it so seriously when we just move on to the next take. And so as the show really depends on these relationships between these actors and they're real. Everyone loves each other so much and trusts each other so much. And that's what makes that so easy. I don't know if I answered your question though.
No, I think you did. And it leads me to another question. I think you might have answered this, but as far as I was a love interest recur on one of Bill's shows. So I'm coming in and some of the series regulars or people that I'd be working with, if they had an issue with the script or they had points that they wanted to bring up. I don't want to say issues, right? They wanted to justify some things or understand some things. We could eat up a lot of time, right? On the day doing that. I was coming in and I was trying to figure out, okay, they're improving this much. I need to be prepared for that type of improv. And then can my character add and when can my character add? So I'm curious with you said second season, it got a little looser, but that first few episodes or that first couple of days of really working with everybody, how did you know when to improv, when to not, when to catch the ball, when to pitch it? Sincerely, because you have heavy handers in there as far as comedic people. You want to be invited back. You're a good guest, right? You want to be a good guest in somebody's home. So you have to know how the home's operating. So I just love to hear.
Yeah, I think for me, it was taking risks. And if I said something and then it felt like it was a little too much, just reading the room and not taking that so to heart. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
I think people are very patient about you testing, like seeing where you can go. And as long as you sort of read the room when something isn't as it's not even acceptable, where it's just not necessary.
That's a good way of putting
Oh.
it. Mhm.
And I also want to, I think the real answer I want to give to your question is you don't really know.
Mhm.
And there's no way to be like, oh, this is how you know that this is well received and this is how you don't know, because no one will really. I heard someone a long time ago, a series regular, was telling me that there was a guest star who came on the show who was overstepping their role. And he was telling me that he didn't tell him that it was happening, but he could see it happening. And I think that's very common on
Mhm.
sets where people don't want to get involved. They don't want to, and I think it's like it's to protect themselves so that they're not in the drama or whatever it is, but people won't always tell you the way they truly are feeling.
You
And
have to feel that
so,
out. You got to
yeah,
feel that out. Yeah.
you got to feel it out, and you got to be okay that sometimes you may not have said the right thing. And you've got to be graceful in those moments and patient with yourself, but also understand that, oh, I overstepped. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. And I think just be as honest and transparent as you can, because people, I think, respond to what they're receiving.
Add that, I think, is a really beautiful way of putting it. And I think sometimes you don't, again, you don't know what you don't know. You're so
Yeah,
excited to get a job. Then you get on the job. Then you have to learn the politics of the job. Then you have to learn egos, and every job has a different set of egos. We all have our egos, right? And how each one works. I can only imagine the difference between shrinking and Chicago Med, just the environment, just different products, different studios, like what they're putting out and how that they're going to approach it. So
different values of showrunners, right? Like different
yeah,
values of the number one, the number two, what they care about.
absolutely. I'm going to ask you a business question that we could totally cut this if you don't want to answer, but I'm curious because I think acting's it's three prongs, right? Like you got to know your tech now. You have to understand tech. So when you get on set, you know how to hit your mark, the framing of what's happening. You have to have a craft, and then you have to really understand how the business works. And once you start working, then you can start really understanding how the business works so you can get yourself to the next level, and continue to work. Reoccurring on two different shows.
Mhm.
Are you and your team having the discussion of trying to push one of them into a series regular, or you want to continue to stay in this great position of being invited to different houses and then also still being open to doing other things?
Yeah, no, we haven't pushed. And that's because it feels like if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. There's no magic, there's no magic word I could say that would make someone, of course, like, you can always put a ring on it if you want.
Exactly. I love sparkly things. I was just wondering. Season 3. Oh, we just are thinking. But it is a business thing. It's like something that actors talk about amongst themselves all the time, which is why I wanted to ask, because
Yeah.
when you get to a certain place in your career, there is a certain amount of leverage or a certain amount of humbleness. Like you said, being continuously invited to two different houses. What a beautiful experience. And they really balance each other out
Yeah.
as far
And
as.
also, there's also the thing of like if I were to enter in as a series regular on either of these shows, which I would be so grateful should that come to
Fruition. Yep.
fruition. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it should come to fruition, it'd still be it wouldn't be my story. It wouldn't be Charlie's story. It wouldn't be Kai's story, right? And there's
Yes.
something to be said about being invited to the table the first time. No.
Absolutely. And that's, I would assume that's the next step in the ladder is to be
Yeah.
invited the first time to have the original story
Yeah.
intact.
And I'm a big believer for all of those actors out there who are starting their careers listening. I am a really big believer in incremental growth. I think when I graduated from NYU grad, there were a lot of dreams because there were stories of people becoming movie stars right out of school, right? Becoming series regulars right out of school. And it was devastating to my confidence that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And what I learned through that devastation was that actually I every set I walked on, every rehearsal room I walked in was a chance for me to practice my craft and learn more about it. And getting to walk onto one recurring set and then another recurring set and then return to the next season and then the next season and keep practicing, that incremental growth has made it so that if I go to set, be invited to be the original series regular in an original series, I won't feel quite so, what am I doing here? Scared, fearful, shameful, whatever. It won't be such a big leap.
Absolutely. Just because I was just talking about Sullivan, he literally went from a co-star to a series regular, and that big leap for him, he was like, whoa. And you don't know what you don't know again until even retrospect a little bit later.
Yeah.
I think there's a beautiful way of, okay, I'm in co-star land, I'm a guest star, I'm being invited over and over again. Okay, now I think I can take on this. It's a responsibility to be a lead of a show. It's a lot of responsibility. And speaking of, I would love to know if you're willing to share, what have you learned on shrinking? You're working with some comedic gods, truly. I think of Michael that way. Jason is amazing and writes constantly. You've got Harrison Ford, come on, and all the women on the show. What has been some of your professional takeaways that you will bring into that series regular?
Yeah. One of them I learned this past year. We were shooting a big episode and most of the cast and supporting cast was on set. And I noticed that the younger generation, and that doesn't necessarily mean 18, but the younger generation of actor was, when every time we went back to our chairs, everyone got on their phone.
Mm.
And I noticed that the older actors, the more veteran actors, didn't. And that they connected with each other and talked. And I saw this happen, and I put my phone in my pocket. I put it on airplane mode and put it in my pocket because I realized that first of all, we are so lucky whenever we get to practice this craft, whenever we get to do this job. And then to be on set and then to go into your phone as opposed to connect with legends like Ted McGinley, like Harrison Ford, like Krista Miller, like Jason Segel. It's just, what am I doing on my phone?
And I hope this show goes, I don't know what they have in mind, if they wanted to go for 5 years or 3 years or whatever, 7 years, God bless. It is such a rarity to get on a show where everybody is so dynamic. The stories are so compelling and just simple and funny, and everybody gets along. I hope you go from this mountaintop right into another great, even if it's a great show, sometimes we don't know the dynamics behind the scenes, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes it can be a real challenge. I love hearing that you guys all get along. I love, love, love that you're being awarded what you guys all deserve. And I put you right. I mean, you're part of the show. You're such a big part of the show. People can't do their job if you're not doing your job. Being a supporting cast is just as integral as the main cast because it wouldn't exist. You guys are doing such a beautiful job. I love this show.
Yeah.
We've needed a show like this for a really long time, really,
Yeah.
truly. And what a dynamic piece from at the beginning of the interview for you being like, I don't see myself in these characters, to then now have a character like this that just fully allows you to fully just accept all of who you are and then share it with us. Truly can't be a better story.
Yeah.
It's great.
And I feel like it leads me to the second thing I learned, which was that as a recurring character, my job is to support the series regular that I'm meant to be a part of their story, right? That's my job. And one of the things that I felt like I hope Michael appreciated, and I'm sure if I said it to his face, he would say it, we've just never talked about it, is that I spent a lot of time as Charlie building out our home life so that he could focus on the other things that he needed to focus on. And by being in charge of that, the person who comes in with that and able to offer if Michael was like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that, or I hadn't thought about that, to be able to fill in their imagination in a place that helps build out their world. I would say that has been such an honor to do for for Michael on Shrinking and also on Chicago Med for the series regulars I support there, because it truly is a blessing to be a part of these worlds and to build out with them, to collaborate in the best way we can.
You couldn't have said that any better, because I really wanted to end the interview saying, congratulations. I know Michael got nominated. I know the statue is there, but that would not exist without you as his Charlie. Well done. You guys are such an amazing duo. It's so fun. And I love hearing that's how you take into support. I hope any actor that's listening to this takes that into their next job. That is really majority of our jobs as working actors, is we are coming to support the story that's already there. We are coming to support the cast that is there so that they can evolve, or we can watch them have a challenge, or we can watch whatever it might be. It's such a huge thing, and it's hard. I think sometimes egos get in the way, or whatever it might be, or you might not understand your placement or your role. And that was such a beautiful way of describing it. You're such a talent. Like, I cannot wait to see more. This was so fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Everything that you did and going into it like this. Lovely. Where can everybody follow along with you? And obviously watch Shrinking and Chicago Med. We don't even have to say that, but Mike, if you're not watching Shrinking, I don't know what's wrong with you. You've got 2 seasons to watch right now. Are you guys starting a 3rd season yet?
We are. Season 3 is on the way.
I can't wait. Okay.
So exciting. You can find me really only on Instagram at Devin Kawaoka. I'm also on, is it called Blue Sky? Is that the new thing?
What is that?
It's the new X.
The kids.
But I went on there, yeah, and I'm like, I don't know. It's not really my personality. So I'm gonna just say, commit to Instagram at Devin Kawaoka.
Amazing. Thank you.